looking at the graph showing the projected climate emissions over time, it's clear that with the plans that are in place at the moment, that 2030 is that that you're not going to be able to reach net zero by 2030. So, Lynn, what are your main concerns about delivering the net zero ambition, and how are you responding to those?
I think, as I understand it, this is very much work in progress. So it's the first stab we've had at putting this budget together. So we're all kind of, trying our best in this space. If we have a look at the park and venues, as I understand it, we are likely to be able to get to the 2030 target. Where we struggle is with the district heat network on the park that requires significant interventions to bring it to a fully decarbonised position. And at the moment, we have a feasibility study out to understand what the technical requirements will be to be able to bring that to a zero carbon position. It won't report until into the spring. That ought to say what the options are for decarbonisation and what it's going to cost. So therefore, it's quite a stab in the dark at the minute around that element. Also, we don't own the district heat network. We are the employer and we can influence Equans, who are the provider, but we can't absolutely control what they do in that space. So this is probably the most high-risk element to the 2030 target. Mm-hmm. Where we do have control, we have a lot higher degrees of confidence.
So there's a kind of list of the main climate measures in the budget. So there's the street lighting, the London Aquatic Centre, the Copper Box Arena and the London Stadium, which all have capital funding against them. The East Bank isn't included in that. Is that because it's going to be transitioning to the boroughs in 24-25, or
it's because it meets full BREEAM requirements, so it's going to be a very sustainable set of buildings. So we're not anticipating major problems related to East Bank. Okay,
so East Bank is basically on track.
Yes.
In terms of net zero. Okay, that's helpful to understand. In terms of, so the key carbon reduction measures that are not funded in your budget, what are they?
There's a number of items on the list. So we have things like the district heating that Lynn has talked about is probably the most significant, albeit that number is a very high level early estimate as required. Other items on there that we're looking at, things like LEDs in the aquatic centre, a solar membrane on the stadium roof, which is ambitious, and feasibility work is currently underway looking at that. Other examples, replacement of chillers at the aquatic centre, lighting at the Copper Box Arena, further LEDs at the stadium, and the update to the London Stadium building management system that I mentioned earlier.
Those are the funded measures?
No, they are the unfunded.
Unfunded.
Yeah, sorry, I think that's what your question was asking about.
Was.
So we have a list of those items, and again, we're happy to put that in writing. In fact, they are in the published submission.
Okay.
They're in the published submission, but happy to follow up as well if there's anything further on those.
Okay, and what are your plans to try and actually get those to be funded?
Yeah, so active discussions with GLA colleagues on those, because particularly some of those may well be low-hanging fruit that makes sense with quick payback, immediate energy consumption reduction. So active discussions with GLA colleagues on the funding for that, including potential access to their green funding routes, green bonds and things like that.
With regard to the district heat network, this is the bulk of where we would need to spend money. We do expect there to be help in the form of government grants towards this, but at the minute we're not able to crystallise that until we have the feasibility report and start those conversations with government in that space.
So forgive me, I don't know how your district heat network is set up. Is it based on gas or?
Yes, it's gas boilers. Yeah,
Ooh, so
exactly. They're just putting in the first heat pump now in the next period. But you know, interestingly, those of us who've been around quite a long time and before the games and so on, this was a real innovation, fantastic district heat network across the whole area. Everybody required to plug in. Westfield and ourselves are joint employers of this facility. But what's happened is the grid has decarbonised much quicker than was expected, and we are running that district heat network on gas boilers. So the first heat pump is going in shortly. At the Equans are taking on the expense of that. And then we have this feasibility study running for how quickly can we decarbonise it completely in line with both the government target of 2050 and can we meet the Mayor's target of 2030.
So when the decision was made years ago to put in a gas district heat network, was any thought given to doing ground source heat pumps?
I've no idea. I'd have to.
They probably didn't exist.
It probably didn't exist. Yeah, it must have gone in well before the games. I would have thought in between 2005 and 2010. So, whether the technology was there, certainly we have, or Equans have, underestimated the rate of decarbonisation at the grid level. And it's not catered for terribly well in the contract either, to be honest with you.
Sorry, it's not catered for well in the contract.
The decarbonisation, anticipating decarbonisation going forward, which means that when it's a concession agreement, which means that when we have the solution in front of us, we may well need to look at the concession agreement and renegotiate it.
Okay, so that will be additional cost potentially.
Potentially, although, as I say, we'll be looking at government grants in this space, of which there are some that look like they might be available to us. And we will be looking at what we can do within the concession agreement that might bring those costs down. But it's early days, really, until we've got the results, and we can maybe have a more detailed session on it when we've got closer to which will happen in 2023.
And because this seems to be absolutely fundamental to
yes,
the decarbonising the heating systems. This is for residential and
Absolutely.
Commercial.
Everyone on the park
is
is
dependent
required
on
to
fossil
plug in
fuel at the moment for their heat.
Yeah.
So this concession agreement with the company that runs the their name was
Equans.
Are you committed to work with them for a particular time period going forward?
Yes, it's a 30 or 40 year contract already, actually, isn't it?
And basically you've got to somehow get rid of all the gas and get the heat pumps in to shift all of that power to low carbon.
That's right, yeah.
So have you done any costing of what that is likely to be?
No, we've got a figure in our numbers that is a huge figure, something in the order of 50 million at the moment for that investment. And that's pushing up our global figures really high. But it's not really informed by a full feasibility study, and this work that's underway at the moment.
Okay, and what's the timescale for getting that work
done? In the spring, yeah. We expect to see the results, yeah.
Okay, and then you'll have a sense of how much it's going to
yes,
cost.
And what the technical solutions might be, and therefore, once we land on an appropriate technical solution, and there may be some further work to do, then we can talk to others about the appropriateness of that and where the funding's coming from. But I think we need the solution in the first instance and how we might do it. There's a number of options that we're looking at there, including heat pumps.
And all the housing
Yes.
and the businesses
Yeah.
and organisations that are supplied by the heat network,
Yeah.
do they have a contract with Equans, or do they have a contract with LLDC to receive their power?
Good question.
Good question. I believe it's with Equans. It's not direct with LLDC.
But you're saying that Equans don't have an obligation to, that you say the decarbonisation is not well set out in the contract. Do they, so is this a complete risk to the Mayor's 2030 decarbonisation plans for the whole of the Olympic Park?
It's important to make clear that Equans are 100% totally committed to this. So we're not working in opposite directions. They have a couple of other heat networks around the country, and they're determined to get to the targets they need to get to. So they're putting huge amounts of their own technical expertise in and their own money, fitting the first heat pump at their own cost, for example. So they are determined and they are being positive in this space. We have positive conversations going on at the government level with BEIS and with DLUC, who are well aware of the challenges and so on. So we've kept those conversations going, and indeed with the Mayor's office. But it's a matter of getting to what is the solution or range of solutions, getting to the right kinds of technical solutions, how quickly they can be implemented and what they would cost. And that's the bit that's the crunchy bit that we'll need to settle in the next few months.
Okay, and I've just got one final question, which is the cost of the power to the householders, to the businesses on the Olympic Park. Are they having to take the hit on the very high gas costs, or is that being absorbed by Equans, or is it being absorbed by LLDC in some way?
Right, so this is a very complex area, so I'm going to give you quite a high-level response, and it's also a very live issue on the park.
I'm
You're
quite
aware
sure
of
it is.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was, but I know
Yeah.
about sort of communal heating systems and the costs which are being...
So first of all, these kinds of heating systems, heat networks, don't fall within the off-gen regulatory guidance, although we are expecting that to change in the next 12 months. And to be fair to Equans, they're welcoming that change. What happens on the standard grid is, as we've seen, as those of us who are just paying our bills in a regular fashion, the price of electricity has been rising and rising, and it's based on the price of gas, based on the gas price, as we know. So that's been, and it basically was rising every quarter, and then we saw more rapid rises, then we saw the Truss government step in, and we've now got, frankly, something, quite complicated conversations going on about where we're all going to land. I think we've got some certainty until March, but not beyond that for all of us. Now, what happens with the heat network is they set their prices on an annual basis. And this is based on what's happening in the market in January of every year. They set a price in the April, and that price holds for the entire year. So unlike the rest of us that have seen prices going up and up and up and up, the heat network customers have not seen that. However, they will be setting their new price for next April in January, when prices are really very high. What we don't understand at the moment, because we can't really get a clear answer out of government, is what kind of reliefs are going to come in. So there is a pot, especially for heat networks, to draw upon heat network customers in the same way that we've been given help as ordinary customers of the grid. But the way that is going to be allocated is not clear at the government level. So there is some difficulty for our customers, because they're obviously wondering what their bill is going to be next April, what it's going to be based on, and how the relief is going to come in. The government itself hasn't set relief beyond next March in any case for anyone at the moment. So we're struggling with those. Does that help?
That does help a lot. And is that a risk for the LLDC in terms of getting tenants into buildings or getting buildings occupied, and also for sales of homes and occupation of homes on the park?
The main risk in that regard is the changes to the building regulations that accord with decarbonisation over time. So at national level, the building regulations have changed, which specify what kind of arrangements need to be in place for movement towards zero carbon for new homes. Now, there is a carve-out for district heat networks, thankfully, which means that if that carve-out wasn't there, a developer might have been able to say, well, I can't plug into your network because I can't meet the building regulations compliance. So what's happened is there's been an allowance for district heat networks to take a bit longer to decarbonise and still meet the required building regulations so that homes can be built on the park and people can occupy them and come into the district heat network charges because of this allowance. But the government is putting heavy pressure on how quickly we can decarbonise. This is outside of the Mayor's 2030 position. There is a lot of pressure on being able to decarbonise that network as quickly as possible. In order to meet government regulations in any case. So we've got pressure coming in from various areas on
All
that.
directions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.